Joining me with the latest, NBC's Ellison Barber. Ellison, since we last spoke, you've heard more artillery. What are you seeing? What are you hearing now?
Yeah, compared to what we heard in the overnight hours up until 4 a.m., what we have heard since the sun has come up has been far more sporadic and not nearly as heavy as what we heard in the overnight hours. But we are still hearing every 20, 30 minutes, give or take, the sounds of artillery headed into the direction of northern Gaza. We also just got a new statement from Israel's defense forces talking about the strikes overnight. Not a ton of information in this, but they are saying that based on the strikes that were carried out overnight, that they killed a senior Hamas official who they claim was involved in planning the massacre in communities surrounding the Gaza Strip on October 7th. They say he was responsible for directing the Hamas militants who infiltrated Israel on paragliders, as well as someone who was responsible for drone attacks on IDF posts. They're saying he was the head of Hamas's aerial array. So that is really the only update we have had. Significant update, if you will, in terms of what was happening inside of Gaza from Israel since that announcement a little after 8 p.m. local time, where an IDF spokesperson said they were expanding their aerial assaults on Gaza, as well as their ground forces were carrying out a more expansive operation inside of Gaza. At about 11 p.m. local time, Hamas's military wing said that their forces were engaging with Israeli forces in two different cities in northern Gaza, and they described those as violent clashes. We don't have a ton of information, or really any information at all, coming out of Gaza this morning, because there has been almost a total blackout of communications for more than 10 hours now. We have not heard from our NBC teams inside of Gaza for hours, but at one point, and this was hours ago, when they were able to get a message out, they described what was happening inside of Gaza as the most significant bombing, the most significant bombardment. They said it was coming from the air and the ground since this war has begun. They were saying that it was impacting every single street. Gaza's Ministry of Health, they have said that 7,000 civilians roughly have died since this war began. When U.S. officials were questioning those numbers, they released names and ages of 7,000 plus people they say have died since this all began. UNICEF has said at least 2,300 children have died inside of Gaza since this war began. The majority of those, according to UNICEF, from Israeli airstrikes. Israel has said they will focus their efforts on the northern part of Gaza, specifically Gaza City, but the areas where they have told civilians to evacuate to, where they said it would be safer, south of the Gaza River or the Wadi River, those areas have been pounded by Israeli bombardments almost every single day as well, including in the last 24 hours, an area called Khan Yunis, where residential buildings collapsed and there were civilian casualties and injuries associated with that. Israel has said their goal here is to make sure Hamas can never operate inside of Gaza or outside of it again, and that they never have the potential to carry out the terror attacks that took place on October 7th. They also say they want to return the 200-plus hostages being held inside of Gaza to their families. But just last week, I spoke to someone who has 3 relatives who were abducted from near Oz, a kibbutz near the Gaza border. She said that she wanted Israel to wait on a full-scale ground invasion because she was hoping that possibly more hostages would be released. There's been large Israeli public support for an escalation of this war. But, Alicia, there's been some disagreement on when a full-scale ground invasion should happen, especially since Hamas started to release some hostages, because there are so many families desperate for their loved ones to get out. Israel has said they believe a lot of those hostages are being held underground in Hamas's tunnels. Those are the same tunnels that Israel said last night their Air Force was striking. Alicia?
Ellison Barber for us. Ellison, as always, thank you.